Okay. Hello. So today is July 19th. Thanks everyone for joining the CDF TOC meeting. Let's take a look at our agenda. So what we have, TOC election timeline and nominations. So thanks everyone to Fatih for preparing it. Then community documentation, reference architecture for CDF, and Pearson Proposal. Any other topics you would like to discuss today?
That was all I had on my list for today.
Yeah, the list looks good. So let's check what we have from the previous week. So yeah, Bevy is there. Budget, I'm waiting for the governing board meeting. Changing the meeting time. I guess the action item is to create a doodle if anyone wants to change it. Well, or maybe I wanted to run it. And yeah, Jenkins X topics we discussed yesterday, I believe. So yeah, the agenda for today is quite short. And yeah, the first item is TOC election. So, Fatih, would you like to summarize?
You can hear me, yeah?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool. So as you see, the timeline there, this is based on like pretty similar to last year's election timeline. So the first thing is basically presenting the timeline, which is what I am doing right now. And the plan is to start the nomination period for the TOC chair on CDF TOC mail list tomorrow. And the rest of the dates, key dates are there. Like we have about 2 weeks nomination period because people are on summer vacation. And then we will have about 10 days of voting period. And then the elected TOC chair gets seated on TOC meeting on August 16th, which fits well with the last year's election timeline as well. And the last item there is to avoid issues we had last year for adding Oleg to corresponding mail lists. So we added that as an explicit item. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow morning, I think Eastern time morning, Michelle will send an email to TOC mail list and post a message to Slack channel, officially kicking off the nomination period. And as you see there is a link. We will collect the nominations on an issue on Foundation repo because some people asked where they can see nomination statements and so on for earlier elections. And we want to make this transparent so the nominations will be collected on the issue. So once you get the mail tomorrow, and if you are interested to run for TOC chair election, please submit your nomination directly under that issue. And that is all. Any questions about the process?
So just on the issue, just put a new comment on the issue for the nomination.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like awards process, this is kind of same as the awards process we had for CDF awards, CDCon awards. So just put your nomination, and then it will be put in Google form for voting later on once the nomination period is over.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Come.
Yeah, so the next item is about community docs. So as Fatih said, most of the docs are already available and waiting for feedback from the team. And we actually have quite a number of them. So infrastructure guidelines, selection process, elected positions, etc., etc. So I believe for all TOC members should see these pull requests on their dashboard. So if you have some time, it would be appreciated if you could review them.
And just so you know, like if we identify some other missing documents or if we find some information is missing in the documents we will submit, then we can always go and make them better. Because some of these things we came up with this list based on the conversations we have been having the last couple of weeks. And we want to make them documented so everyone can learn more about how things are running within CDF. How do you request infra support and so on?
Yeah, so it's definitely better to do it incrementally. Thanks a lot for creating all this foundation pull requests. Okay. Yeah, then CDF Reference Architecture. Will someone like to present the slides? Would you like me to do that?
I can share my screen, and Terry, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So what we're looking at here really is a sort of bigger picture view about where we think we should be focusing our attention next within the CDF. Now, as part of the work that we've been doing with best practices, I've been interviewing a lot of people out there, you know, in small and large organizations, and it's become pretty clear that there are really two categories of consumers of continuous delivery out there, and all of this hinges around the fundamental reality that continuous delivery is just part of a business methodology to optimize product commercialization. And so for those organizations that are already heavily inoculated with that culture, continuous delivery is an obvious part of what they do. And then those organizations are mostly very mature in this space, and they're consuming some of the projects that we use, or they're contributing to those projects. But they're also a limited subset of the software development world in general. And for the rest of the world, continuous delivery is actually proving to be a really hard problem, because they haven't got the basic cultural understanding of what's driving these behaviors, and therefore they're not understanding what the benefits are or what the tools are doing for them. And so you've got this fundamental challenge that implementing continuous delivery is really hard when you don't know what you don't know. And at a project level, many of these continuous delivery tools are actually only focusing on small parts of the engineering bit of the problem, not addressing the bigger picture, which is, how do you make this work for an organization so that they realize the value that's inherent in those DORA metrics? How do you get people to the point where they can actually get to that top 20% where they're performing 1,000 times better than their competitors? So if we're really going to spread the adoption of continuous delivery and get a much bigger audience for it, then we need to be looking at ways in which we can address those issues. And a lot of that is, how do we actually reach out to those people who would benefit but are not yet deeply invested in this as a way of working, and not seeing how they can use those technologies and those methodologies. Now, the challenge is that most of those organizations, whilst they're building technology, they're not free to mix and match the build tools that they're using. In the vast majority, they're constrained to using whatever's available from their cloud vendor. Now, obviously, the cloud vendors are quite happy to use open source solutions, so long as it means that they can create product offerings which are reliable and profitable for them and aligned to what their customers want. So one of the things that we should be looking at is moving away from just focusing on the local engineering problems within individual projects and start thinking about the bigger picture of how the CDF can help to span that gap between project teams, the vendors that are benefiting from those projects, and then the end users that we and they are both servicing with the things that we're building. So we need to be looking at how we can mentor all levels to help bridge that gap between, you know, the small engineering challenges and the bigger picture of what do people need to be able to do with continuous delivery to solve their own problems in their own delivery space. Now, obviously, we've got a bunch of the parts of this recipe already in place. You know, we've done a lot of work over the past few years with best practices, with SIG events, interoperability, and now with the new developing areas of MLOps and software supply chain. But what we need to do next is start to tie this together into something that is a bit less theoretical and a lot more accessible to new organizations who are just coming into this space and who really want to be able to benefit from these techniques. So as a result, and I think we can skimp ahead, to what we're proposing here is to take the learnings that we've got from all of these pieces of work and use that to spell out a reference architecture for continuous delivery. So here's the simple map of all the pieces that you need to think about from a practical perspective to be able to do this within your team or your organization. And then use that reference architecture to guide a number of reference implementations using CDF projects and vendor tools. So that we're helping to set a simple pathway to say, look, here are the business challenges, here are here's the bigger picture of how all this stuff needs to tie together, and then here are some places that you can go to get a starting point that says, you know, if you work with this reference implementation, you'll be able to get up and running and have your learning experience in a hands-on way within a structure that's already helping to guide you down the right path. And certainly from my previous experience leading teams on that CD journey, the fundamental problem is that the learning curve, especially for cloud native, is so high a vertical a cliff that it's almost impossible for people to make the right decisions quickly enough to safely take their organization on that journey. So what you need to do is give them a set of tools that are already pre-configured in a way that they can have their learning experience in a more guided fashion. So you put them on rails to an extent, you allow them to start using the process and the methodology, and then as they start to find individual problems where they need to diverge from that on rails path, they've got the opportunity to learn in more depth about, you know, a particular challenge within Kubernetes or a particular, you know, configuration of one of the project's tool sets in order to enable them to then achieve what they need to do. They don't have to learn everything up front in order to decide how to structure their whole delivery process.
Terry, one quick question. do you envision that we would create like training sessions or something like that, or like videos or something like that for folks to be able to consume this type of information?
So we already have some of that planned into the best practices roadmap, but the idea really is to help to provide a conduit for the individual projects to reach their end customers by providing things like that through the umbrella of the CDF. So the idea really is to set some basic guidelines around, these are the bits that you need within an architecture to be doing continuous delivery in a consistent and reliable way, and then facilitate individual projects to come forwards and say, well, and here's how you can implement that using this tool set or this combination of projects. And I think the key recipe here is the interoperability and the SIG event standards that will make it easy for people to pick and mix from any of those individual projects that are using those standards, but still operate within an overarching set of guidelines that will help people to understand and be comfortable that they're going in the right direction.
Got it. And then to kind of follow up on that, would you envision down the road that we would do some sort of like certification process like they have for like like a Kubernetes application developer certification? Do you think that down the road that we would have something like that for the different personas around the CD world?
I mean, you could certainly consider doing something like that. And I think there's probably a debate to be had over how much value that adds. I think what would probably be more useful to focus on in the early days is how we can actually improve the continuous delivery experience through the cloud vendors. So how can we ensure that when a cloud vendor is selling you something that is badged as a continuous delivery solution, that it's actually doing all of the things you actually need to be able to do in that space.
Got it.
And
Yep.
I think that's particularly needed at this stage in the MLOps space,
Right.
because there are many tools out there now which are MLOps tools that are solving one out of a couple of hundred problems that exist in that space. And so there's no one you can go to today and get an end-to-end MLOps solution that will actually solve all the problems you've got. So there's a lot of value for us to add to help the cloud vendors get better products in that space that are more connected and covering more of the requirements in that space. So we could provide a lot of guidance and a lot of value, and in return, hopefully encourage those vendors to commit more resources to building and supporting open source projects in those areas.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely. I totally agree with that.
Thanks for the overview.
So we have one more slide here. Like again, thanks Terry for presenting this. Now the timing is actually pretty good to bring this topic up, and TOC must share his feedback, their feedback about this. But we have a governing board strategy session planned for next week, and this topic feels like a good fit for that session. So I'm wondering if any of you have any feedback about this before this topic is brought into GB meeting next week and discussed there. You don't have to provide your feedback right now, but maybe if you have any comments, you can put them directly on the deck.
Hey, Fatih, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you see this helping to support renewals in October? Because I can imagine if I was a cloud vendor and saying, hey, something is coming here, this reference architecture, I would very much like to be a part of that and help guide standards here. I mean, do you see this helping your case with renewals?
Well, probably, but I think the key thing here is, like, as Terry summarized, like, we have all these really cool work happening within CDF, both within the groups, different special interest groups, as well as the projects. And I think if we could have this type of effort, bringing all these developments in one place, giving people a golden path or paved road while they are moving to CD, that would in turn help the cloud providers or vendors to build solutions for satisfying their customers' requirements, which in turn those organizations take part in this effort. I think this is, like, regardless of that topic, I think this is a good thing for communities, both within CDF and outside, and projects, and all types of different participating organizations. Because, like, even if ourselves, when we look at what is happening within CDF, it is sometimes very difficult to wrap our head around, because Interop is doing many things, Events is doing many things, MLOps has a roadmap, we are starting discussions around software supply chain, but it's very difficult to see how these pieces could fit each other well, helping the organization. So in summary, I think this would benefit those conversations, but more importantly, it would benefit us improving our lives.
Yeah, no doubt it's needed. I was just, Terry, just seeing your presentation, I immediately thought of, like, well, hey, if I was a vendor of these solutions, I would very much want a seat at the table for building that reference architecture.
I think that's a very important part of this, is that we really need to be encouraging greater participation and starting to lead with the knowledge that we've got, because the tools that we're building here are massively valuable to that vendor community. They're all relying on these tools to keep core systems available, and so if we can use the foundation to encourage the creation of more and better tools, that obviously benefits the vendors. But at the same time, we need to be focusing everyone on doing the stuff that is actually adding value. And one of the key patterns that I see quite frequently with open source projects is that you get a huge amount of energy going on the engineering side, where people are scratching personal itches and generating lots of code to fix particular narrow engineering problems. But it's less common to have involvement from product managers who are taking a bigger picture view of, what do people actually need to solve global problems with these technologies. And I think that a part of the role that CDF can play here is in helping to facilitate those conversations, to say, look, here's what's going on today, but here's what we as a foundation see people needing to be able to do, and here's where there are gaps in what they can buy from people who are selling a layer on top of the open source technologies that we are helping to provide. So if we can span that conversation up and down that tree to help facilitate better understanding at all levels, I think will help to further the cause of continuous delivery in general.
So can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, thank goodness. So I apologize. I had to drop off and reboot my machine and come back on. So Terry, I didn't get to see your complete presentation. I only got to see a portion of it. So I'm coming in a little bit, I guess you say, half knowledgeable of exactly about what we're talking about in this. My biggest concern, however, is that I think we have to choose the message we're going to take to potential vendors and our existing members. For quite some time now, we've been talking about CD events being that basically that way for us to solve the old problem of plugins and interoperability. And I'm a little concerned about splitting that message. So I feel like we have to choose one or the other initially to get it going, because I don't know if we can, if we have that strong of a messaging engine to try to message around both of these, a reference architecture versus a CD events where everybody is starting to create an event-based CD process around some level of CD event, a listener. I know we have standards out there that we've been working on in vocabulary. We've been working on it for quite some time. So I'm just going to put it out there that is my biggest concern about your reference architecture. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying we should choose which one we're going to move forward with and have a clear, direct message from the TOC. I think having more than one is hard.
Yeah, and I think we have some pieces of work that have moved on, so we're freeing up some people's resources. So we will have a little bit more capacity again now. But also I think an important part of this is actually having a conversation with a slightly different audience, so that we're attracting a slightly different group to come and contribute to the work that we're doing. Because right now we've been doing a lot of very, very focused, detailed engineering work in the conventional software pipeline side of things. But now what we're trying to do is tie together a lot more disparate pieces across software supply chain, conventional CI/CD, machine learning based CI/CD, and that's focused on a very different audience. So I would expect that the bulk of what we've been doing to date in terms of, yes, very, very much so.
So what is that audience? Who is that audience?
So that audience is going to be people who are less directly conventional software engineering focused on the pipeline side. So it's much more people who are trying to deal with the problems at the next level up in the stack, which is, how do we deliver product assets in a consistent and reliable way at the cadence that we need to keep up with the marketplace as it's moving today. So it's starting to engage with a new audience and bring in people who have a slightly different focus. And so I don't think this would detract at all from the key work that's going on the engineering side there. Instead, I think it helps us to grow the audience and get more contributors into helping on these projects.
And the reference library, when I finally was able to get back on, you were talking about, is there a reference to specific tools in that reference architecture?
So the idea really is to say, here's the overarching patterns that you need to put in place, and then here are tools that can perform roles against those patterns. So there's a general reference view of what are the design patterns involved, and then there are some reference implementations that project teams can put forward to say, well, this is how you fulfill those patterns using our tool set.
So that means we could exclude, would the tools have to do some level of re-architecting in order to fit into those patterns?
Well, it's going to be a case of saying, you know, initially, here's the landscape, and this tool currently fits into this space, but its roadmap has it expanding to cover, you know, the following bits of the architecture. And so it then becomes more of a translation from that landscape view of the projects to a roadmap view of, you know, here's where we are today, here's where each of these projects is intending to evolve to solve, you know, a broader set of challenges in that space. And that should help to feed back into those projects to help guide them as to where there's demand for different features and, you know, what customers actually need coming next.
And wouldn't we be able to do that with defining events where you fit, where your tool fit in from an event perspective?
Well, events is a very, very narrow viewpoint on a much broader set of views. So from a conventional software delivery perspective, events is currently laser focused on what we do to build conventional software assets with CI/CD today. But conventional CI/CD is gradually going to become of less and less interest over the next decade as every single project becomes a machine learning project, which has got a ton of ML assets in it. So there needs to be a roadmap of how we get from, you know, what we've been focused on over the past 3 or 4 years to what we actually need to build to service the needs of customers over the next decade.
So that, and this will be my last question then, and I know we have other things we have to talk about. So that reference architecture then is that a set of data that we can do some level of data science against? Is that what you're suggesting? Is that reference architecture?
No, really what it's going to be is a set of the difficult challenges that exist within the continuous delivery problem space. So it is going to be here are the patterns that you are going to encounter at some point in your journey with continuous delivery, and here are the ways in which people have successfully mitigated risk in those areas.
So here are the symptoms of these particular problems, and then here's a possible solution. Is that the goal of the data? So the other concern I have is in that is that if that reference architecture specifically reference tools, we are going to have membership issues. We just have, if we go down that road, we have to remember that we're trying to be a vendor neutral place for CD members. So whatever that reference, you know, whatever those symptoms are, spitting out results for particular tools may not be a good idea. It may be these are the particular spaces that you should look at to solve these particular issues. But I would push against having anything that spit out particular tools and vendors' names.
So this is where what we've tried to do, and we do the same in best practices, is that we have the CDF view, which is the technology agnostic view, and then we have the viewpoint which is based on white papers or reference implementations that says, and here's how X has addressed this problem with their technology. So it's an opportunity for the members in the space to show the challenges that they've come up against and how they've used particular technologies to address those. But that's equally available to and everyone is free to provide their own, reference implementation views of how to leverage their tools or technologies or approaches to solve that wider picture of how do you follow best practice. It's the common carrier thing of
Thank you.
Just going to jump in and say that for both what Terry said and some of the concerns that Tracy raised, there's so much in both that I agree with. I think that realizing this is really for two different audiences, and that from the CDF perspective, like the fact that we are working on this reference architecture in no way is going to take away from our commitment to CD events. At all. I wouldn't see that. And that in fact, the two can work well, because as we discussed the different problem spaces in the reference architecture and some potential tools that you can use in those spaces, I think emphasizing how CD events can help you write less glue code and bring your pipeline together is a really nice way to bring CD events into that as well.
Thanks, Kara. Yeah, I think from a CD events point of view, I would hope to see like the use cases that we set for the CD events project, like kind of realized or mapped into a reference architecture, so to kind of give them more strength or, like implementation in the reference architecture. So I would see the two activities kind of complementing each other.
Okay. So anything else on this topic? CD events, I guess we have follow-up, and we got quite a lot of feedback. Thanks a lot for the presentation. So Lori asked, what are the action items there? Should we revise it?
Well, since this is like kind of a brain dump of few of the community members, I guess like as noted on the last slide, this topic could be brought up to governing board as a strategy topic, which will take place next week, and then we can gather feedback from governing board as well. And I see Steve here.
I think this will be a great topic to bring up to the governing board. I think Robert actually raised a great point, which is this is something I think which will be really interesting to the members as well, because once we have a reference architecture, then that kind of gives us something where we can anchor and talk about how we add value to the continuous delivery pipeline. And I think this is something which is much needed from a thought leadership piece. We really need to up-level the conversation that we're pitching from the CD Foundation to be more thought leadership, to provide a larger message. And this is an important first step. So I'm excited about this.
And I think the only thing that, from what I heard, that might be missing is just a good comparison and contrast between to Tracy's points, to what the other SIG groups are doing, so that this kind of makes sense in the overall scheme of things, so that there isn't, I think that was a really good sort of discussion, and like, how is this different? How does this make sense? And how is it still vendor neutral? So maybe that could be just sort of added into the discussion, so that those points that were brought up today are addressed and can be agreed upon.
And one thing, when Terry was, cloud vendors came up a lot, And right now, I don't think we have any representation in the CDF from cloud vendors, especially folks that are working on that are actually like product managers for the pipeline tools. Like we don't have somebody from Google that's representing, Google Cloud. Somebody from GitHub with GitHub Actions. I think if we're able to get those cloud vendors, those product managers on board, I think it'll give us a lot more insight into their direction and how we can help them with from our reference architecture standpoint, being able to merge the two together. I don't know how we reach out to those folks, but I think that's going to be a pivotal part of what Terry's been talking about.
Steve, never underestimate the power of FOMO with product.
Yeah, no kidding.
Presenting them an opportunity to have a seat at the table, I don't see that being a tough ask. My recommendation for the governance board, what form of the word are we
Yeah, I think it's
using?
governing board.
Governing. Okay. Terry, the challenges and the opportunities, that's a solid slide, just laying it out what we're missing out. How is this different from what the SIGs are doing? And just letting them know that this is an opportunity to bring it all together. I imagine the GB would be, I don't know, I've never been to one of those meetings, but I imagine they would be excited about that, to just say, oh, hey, we've got a project here that's in essence a meta project, and going to tie all these things together. I also see it identifying areas that CDF is lacking. And that would be exciting for either new open source projects, new companies, or for people to add things to their existing offering. I think that's strong. And both of those things encourage more people to join. And I think that's what we all want. Only feedback I have, but I'm a fan.
So I can take the action item to make this topic part of the next week's governing board strategy meeting. And I can take another action to bring updates from the governing meeting back to TOC 2 weeks from now. So we can provide feedback from governing board back to TOC. And then Terry and we can start adding some more information around the feedback we received on the deck, both from TOC and the governing board. And during the meeting in 2 weeks, during TOC meeting, we can discuss this topic again, and then think about logistics, like how this work should start, assuming both TOC and governing board approve this initiative. It could be a working group, for example. It could be something else. And then from there, we can start reaching out to, community members or CDF members and highlight this initiative being kicked off and come and join us. Would that be a good plan? And also, Lori, would that answer your question about next steps?
I think so. I think that's a solid way to move forward, because the discussion really pointed out some highs and some holes. And I think if you could just update the deck to kind of, like Robert was saying, show what's missing, like Stephen said, show how this is a thought leadership position for the CDF, and then also how this works with the SIGs and not opposed to conflicting with what they're doing. It brings it all together. And I think that shows, a better overall package, a great presentation. And I think it'll be easier to then get people to work on it, because you've already kind of given the highs and lows and the needs and the opportunities.
Okay. And Andrea, I see a comment from you here as well. Shall we have a... Yeah, we can perhaps work on this before the GB meeting next week to add some of the feedback we received. Okay.
Yeah. So the remaining item for us, so Pearson proposal.
Yeah, so I put that out there.
Mhm.
2 weeks ago, the PR was created with the proposal. There weren't any comments directly on the PR, but there was some and I believe Stephen and Sahindra are here to answer any questions. And I'd like to see if we can go ahead and move forward on that after we get, if anybody has any questions for them directly.
Yeah,
So that's
so
what
I'm here and happy to answer any questions about the Persia proposal. It's a vendor neutral effort, which JFrog is doing in collaboration with Huawei, who's also a CD Foundation member, Deploy Hub, who's also involved in the CD Foundation, Docker, Oracle, and who am I forgetting? Of course, we're open to other companies contributing as well. So, and the base,
future.
Yeah, FutureWay and Huawei. And the basic goal for what we want to do is improve software supply chain. So I think this is a really important opportunity for the CD Foundation to kind of leave a big mark in the software supply chain security area, which is something which we've wanted to expand as a foundation into. Our goal as a project is specifically to provide a build from source toolchain. So we're building that on top of other CD Foundation technologies like CD events, Tecton, and other technologies which are part of the CD Foundation. And then on top of that, we're building a mutable transaction ledger, which will store all of the different packages and binaries available in the network. And the first version of this is targeted at the container ecosystem. So in collaboration with Docker, we have a prototype which allows you to download images from the Docker official image set. So happy to answer any questions about it, but I think this is a project which we're excited to propose to the CD Foundation and would welcome having a vendor neutral governing body like the CDF be the permanent home for Persia.
So basically, they want to introduce these governing bodies after they accept it to the CDF, or do we consider it as a blocker?
So you mean in terms of the governance of the Persia project, Oleg?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have a draft for this. Steve Taylor put this together for the governance draft. But I think it makes sense for us to fit in line with what other CD Foundation projects are doing. So that's why we're proposing it first. And then upon acceptance, we would create the similar sort of governance and oversight for the project to meet the standards for like what other projects are doing.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. So
Yeah,
we
so
have some
there's a
requirements to governance in the graduating checklist. So if the project wanted to reach a graduated status, then there is a bunch of things to do. But for incubating, it should be perfectly fine.
Yeah, so what we have right now is a bootstrap governance board that the Persia project's running under. And I can foresee that that into a full governance board with the elections and all that a normal project does once we get it in under the CD Foundation.
Thank you.
So is there a way we can move forward with a vote on the project?
I think that formally we are ready.
Do we have quorum?
Usually the
Do we have
voting
quorum today?
happens asynchronously anyway. So how the vote happens, somebody, I guess Michelle or me, could start voting on the mailing list and we vote there. There is no voting on the meeting in the chat, I believe.
That works. Yeah, if you want to start a vote thread on the mailing group, on the TOC mailing, that works.
Okay, I can do that probably later today. So timeline-wise, we are still fine. So what we discussed in the previous meetings. So if we reach, so if you have a decision by August, everyone is fine from the stakeholders.
Yeah, no, I think we're more concerned about making sure we have the right process support and adoption than rushing the process. So doing a good vote by the mailing list is awesome. We'd like to hear from folks. If there are any questions here in the meeting or later, we're happy to answer them about the project or kind of our goals and what we're trying to accomplish. And I think also it should be some good rolling thunder as we get towards the end of the year for more announcements and things we can talk about from a CD Foundation perspective.
Okay, then let's do that.
And did the new members of the board get added to the TOC mailing list?
No idea. I don't have.
I haven't been. Yeah, Oleg, I haven't been getting anything yet, but I did send a request to be added to it. I thought I already was, but I don't know, Kara, is there a way we can check that?
But I'm not been on this mailing list. I'm just checking right now, but I don't think that at least I have any permissions on this mailing list except posting things.
Yeah, I think you can subscribe to mail list yourself. I put the link to you are talking about CDF TOC mail list, yeah?
Yeah, like I haven't been added to. I don't think I'm added to it, but I did send a request to be added to it.
But you don't need to send a request. You can just log in and subscribe to mail list yourself. That's how I've done it 3 years ago at least. Like.
Okay. Yeah, well, I thought I did that. I will join the group again.
I can check with Michelle to see if it has any issues or not. And if she can add everyone, we can make sure that all the TOC members are in the list. So we can, let me
another way was discussed last time was maybe just vote on the PR itself. So you don't have to go through the mailing list or anything. Because the PR is open to all, so you can just vote on there.
I think we can just use hybrid approach. So mailing list is needed for our charter, but we can do vote here and there. And yeah, I can confirm I have no permissions on this mailing list, so I cannot add or verify a request.
Yeah, I take.
It looks like I'm in there. But...
Oh, okay. Anyway, I will check that all the TOC members documented on GitHub is on that mail list right now.
And then you're going to send out the vote later today. Okay, cool.
Yes. Okay. Anything else about Pearson? Yeah, thanks a lot to the team for pushing it. So the last item on our agenda is new meeting time. So basically, I postponed it until the end of the vacation period. I created a doodle. You can find a link in the meeting notes. I will duplicate it to the chat. So the idea here is that since we still have some TOC members that couldn't join, so we can revise the meeting time. And if there is no strong consensus for another meeting time, we just keep the current meeting time. So any votes are welcome. Yeah, actually, it also raises a question we had a long ago. Should we start doing something in the APAC friendly time zone? Maybe not every 2 weeks, but once a month or so. And if someone is interested, let's talk about it. But yeah, I created in the poll, I also added some morning, well, European morning slots. So if you're interested to participate, please vote there too. Okay. And I guess that's it for today. So yeah, thanks everyone. And yeah, I guess my key takeaways is the governing board meeting next week and peer voting. So hopefully we will have some progress for reference design for the next week. And if any reviews needed, just drop the slides, etc., to the Slack channel, so that maybe people could jump in. Because even in the current state, it should be good enough to drop in general, so that everyone could take a look. It could be an additional way to facilitate feedback. Okay. And
Sounds
thanks,
good.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.